want to bring in a report on the schedule as it is now arranged at Arlington National Cemetery and the grave site. Here is CBS News correspondent Neil Strauser with that report.
All during this time of tragedy, the decisions of the widow, Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, seem to be in keeping with her husband's sense of history. Instead of burial in Massachusetts, she's given her husband to the nation, in the Nation Cemetery at Arlington, across the Potomac from Washington. The grave is already dug at Arlington National Cemetery, and there 126,000 fellow Americans, many of them fallen heroes of wars past, will keep the late president company. The man who shaped history and died in doing it will have the company of many other famous men. There are generals and admirals. General John Pershing of World War I, Jonathan Wainwright of the Bataan Death, Leonard Wood, Admiral William T. Sampson, William Bull Halsey of World War II. Statesmen are there too, President William Howard Taft, the other president buried at Arlington, George Marshall, soldier and Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan. An American flag now covering the grave site at Arlington, the historic spot where this afternoon the late President John Fitzgerald Kennedy will be laid to rest. Back now to Roger Mudd at the Capitol.
People here who stood in line for up to 7 hours to pass through the rotunda have now left. All the offices and places of business are closed now, and most of them have gone home, but yet there is another shift of mourners which has moved into the East Front Plaza, and now the crowd that is assembled on the curving curbstone line on the plaza has taken its place. And the scene is very much like it was yesterday morning about this time. Last night, this East Front Plaza was one huge staging area. Great blocks of mourners moved from place to place. The line began at one corner of the Senate office building, and by the time it had reached the bronze doors of the rotunda, it had stretched by police count about 25 miles back to the northeast part of town, back toward the Anacostia River, back toward the D.C. Stadium, along Maryland Avenue and Massachusetts Avenue, and then doubling back on East Capitol Street. On duty here all night say that mothers and fathers waited in line with babies in arms covered with swaddling blankets, the cold seeping in, but they stood, they waited. Close to 500,000 people. The last time an American was laid in state here was in 1958, and there were 2 Americans, the 2 unknown soldiers, one from the Korean War, the other from World War II. Probably no sight could sear into the conscience of America like this one of shuffling people passing by endlessly. Young, old, and rich, poor, some composed, some openly weeping. "17 hours and 21 minutes. Of the morning police moved through the crowds as best they could with portable loudspeakers, telling the people that the doors would be closed in a matter of hours by 8 or 9 o'clock, giving the people warning. The original schedule was to keep the doors open until 9 o'clock last night. They had figured that 8 to 9 hours would take care of the crowd, but they miscalculated. Of course, not deliberately, but it was something no one expected. Many people who came here last night or heard that the crowd was so huge stayed at home and then took their chances at coming down just before dawn. Those who still couldn't get in have now assembled along the low retaining wall and curb and sidewalks of the East Plaza. This building almost seems to represent the continuity of one era to another. This East Front, where there have been inaugurations and ceremonies of state, where Lincoln was inaugurated and where Lincoln lay in state, and where John Kennedy was inaugurated and is now lying in state. Every 10 minutes during the Guard of Honor's 30-minute watch, the captain of the guard silently will shift his position from parade rest to attention, and then from attention to parade rest. After a 2-beat pause, the other 4 members of the Guard will follow the command. This simply is to relieve the tension of the military posture. We've seen these guards as they come off the rotunda floor, erect and precise, heavy perspiration from the 30 minutes of rigidity. We have further details now of this morning's schedule, and we get the house from CBS News correspondent Robert Pierpoint.
Here at the White House this morning, it's a somewhat quieter morning than yesterday. The setting is a little different. We don't have the honor guard lined up on the driveway here. The north portico does not have the large crowd of people that were here yesterday. But soon, in about 45 minutes, Mrs. Kennedy and the family will emerge from the north portico entrance there and will leave the White House for the Capitol. There has been put out a narrative of events that is rather formal, but is rather interesting, and I'll read it to you. It says, at the rotunda that at 10:30 this morning, Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General will arrive by car at the foot of the East Capitol steps. An escort will meet them and designate the place for them to stand on the plaza at the foot of the steps facing to the north, and opposite them, facing them, will be the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Within 2 minutes, Mrs. Kennedy, having taken her position at the foot of the steps, the casket will appear in the main door of the Capitol, and appropriate honors will be rendered by the Coast Guard band, which is in the rear of Mrs. Kennedy. Honors are ruffles and flourishes, Hail to the Chief, followed by the hymn, O God of Loveliness. At the start of the hymn, the casket will be borne slowly down the steps and placed upon the caisson. When the casket has come to rest on the caisson, Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General should return to their car, which should take up position directly behind the caisson. The clergy move to their car, which takes position behind the U.S. flag and in front of the caisson. The Joint Chiefs of Staff and the military aides to the President, having been positioned in front of the caisson, and Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General being in position behind the caisson and in their car, the march will commence toward the White House in a matter of minutes. That, of course, is the funeral cortege that will move back down from Capitol Hill in exactly the same position, the same group as went up to the Capitol escorting the body of President Kennedy yesterday. At approximately 50 minutes after leaving from in front of the rotunda, the Marine element of march, which directly precedes the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the caisson, will have arrived on Pennsylvania Avenue, directly opposite the northeast gate of the White House, which is behind me and to my right. At that point, one platoon of the Marine Company will detach itself from the main body and enter the northeast gate, and will be followed by all elements in their rear: the Joint Chiefs of Staff, presidential military aides, the national colors, the clergy, the caisson, the personal flag of the President, the caparisoned horse, and the car bearing Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General. I'm reading now from the official narrative of events, and this is given to all of those who are participating so that they will know exactly what to do at what time. Sounds very formal, but at a time like this, you need a guide to tell you what the military funeral, what the honors, just exactly what you should do. It says the column that has entered the White House grounds will proceed on the drive, not passing under, but keeping to the right of the portico. The drive divides here behind me, and cars can pull up directly under the portico, but they can also pass to the right, and their orders are, in this case, to pass outside the portico. It says until the head of the platoon of Marines reaches the northwest gate, which is on Pennsylvania Avenue, out here in this direction. There it will be halted. Mrs. Kennedy's car will pull up under the portico roof, and halt at the front steps of the White House, at which point she will dismount with the Attorney General. Upon her leaving the car, it should be backed up 10 or 15 yards. It is presumed that Mrs. Kennedy will mount the steps with the Attorney General and be met by members of the presidential staff. Now, you'll note that there is no word about whether or not the Kennedy children, Caroline and John Jr., are to participate. Actually, we don't know yet whether they will or not. Yesterday, we did not expect them to appear, and they did. Perhaps they will this morning. Continuing with this narrative of events put out for those participating, the entire driveway in the White House grounds will be cordoned by Navy enlisted men bearing the state and territorial flags. They will render appropriate honors upon the passage of the caisson. That is exactly the same as it was yesterday, although that military honor guard has not yet arrived. It is presumed that the presidential military aides will remain in column behind the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If the aides decide they wish to enter the White House, it is their responsibility to position themselves back in the column prior to Mrs. Kennedy's leaving the White House to follow the caisson on foot. It is assumed that the foreign dignitaries, having been formed in the proper column inside the White House, extending from the East Room down the hall to the north entrance. When Mrs. Kennedy mounts the steps and has been met by the presidential staff, she will be told by a member of that staff when the entire group within the White House is ready to move off. Mrs. Kennedy is then free to move down the steps and to the left along the drive towards the northwest gate on foot. That is the northwest gate. Perhaps you can see the crowds of thousands of people that have been here since early morning. I went up the same route that the caisson will travel to the funeral, to the church. And by 8 o'clock this morning, thousands of people all along the route. They're sitting there, bundled up. It's cold this morning in Washington. It was below freezing about that time. Sitting there bundled up, many of them since dawn, many of them with their lunches in paper sacks. And I was struck by the fact that so many of them are young people, contemporaries of the president or younger, even down to children. I'll continue with the reading of the last few paragraphs of the narrative explaining to those participating exactly what is going to happen this morning. On descending to the driveway, this is from the White House, Mrs. Kennedy will find the caisson followed by the caparisoned horse some 20 to 30 yards to the left and on the driveway. As she approaches the caisson, the Marine platoon, halted at the northwest gate, will move the column off so that Mrs. Kennedy will not have to halt behind the caparisoned horse. The normal distance for marching behind the horse is approximately 10 to 15 yards. Now, this horse, of course, is the riderless horse, the traditional military symbol of a fallen hero. The dignitaries already formed in the White House will move out immediately behind Mrs. Kennedy. It is presumed that Mrs. Kennedy will be escorted by her brother-in-law, the Attorney General. And I might mention that the Attorney General has been with Mrs. Kennedy almost constantly since she arrived back in Washington and he met her at Andrews Field on that fatal Friday night. It is further presumed that the other mourners and dignitaries on foot will keep about a 5-yard distance in rear of Mrs. Kennedy and her escort. The mourners behind Mrs. Kennedy and her escort should maintain a 5 or 6 man front. As the Marine platoon moves out of the northwest gate, the Black Watch will move in, following the Marine platoon, and immediately in front of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The Black Watch is, of course, the famous British regiment, and they put on a performance here on the White House on the South Lawn just a couple of weeks ago, at which the President and Mrs. Kennedy were host to thousands of school children from all over the Washington area, and they are going to be marching in the funeral cortege this morning. And then the final note of the narrative says that the Naval Academy Choir, positioned on the lawn opposite the north portico, will begin to sing as the caisson enters the northeast gate, and they will sing 3 hymns only. So that is the official word of instruction to all of those participating in this occasion today. I thought perhaps you might like to see what the official funeral invitation looks like. It's a white envelope, edged in black, the name on the outside, And then inside, the invitation, also edged in black, the embossed seal of the President of the United States, and it says, "Funeral service of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, late President of the United States, November 25th, 1963, at 12 noon, St. Matthew's Cathedral, Rhode Island Avenue between 17th and 18th. And there is, of course, a seat pass enclosed because the funeral is by invitation only. Mrs. Kennedy and the family have been upstairs this morning in the private quarters. I saw Senator Smathers go in to the White House a short while ago, close friend of the Kennedys, very close friend of the late president, perhaps going up to have a few words with Mrs. Kennedy before she leaves in about a half hour from now for the rotunda. That is the situation at the White House right now. This is Robert Pierpoint, and now back to Roger Mudd.
The sky here on Capitol Hill is absolutely cloudless, an azure blue that is without blemish. Almost a Paris blue. Gorgeous day. Once again, the crowd is formed on the plaza, just as it did yesterday on this National Day of Mourning. On the base of the East Front, the military guard of Air Force, Army, Marine, Navy, dressing up its ranks. These men are from the military district of Washington, which serves as a ceremonial guard for occasions of state. Precise traditions of the military that have passed from generation to generation. These men trained in the absolute decorum and precision of such occasions. This is Carl Albert, John McCormick. McCormick, of course, Speaker of the House, and now second in line behind Lyndon Johnson, Albert, the Majority Leader of the House. Democratic Senator Henry Jackson of Washington State, one of the President's close friends who served as Democratic National Chairman right after the convention of 1960. Senator Strom Thurmond of South Carolina. This is John Lindsay, Republican of New York. On the right is Democratic Congressman Roman, I can't make it out now. Members of the Senate and the Congress paying their final respects here in the rotunda. Speaker McCormick again. On the extreme left is Democratic Senator Claude Pepper of Florida. Wilbur Mills remaining with the Speaker. On the Speaker's right is the Democratic whip of the House, Hale Boggs of Louisiana. There's Carl Albert of Oklahoma on the right, the majority leader of the House. Directly behind him is Hale Boggs. Senator Pepper of Florida. Behind Pepper is Speaker McCormick. There there is the House Republican leader now on the extreme right, Charles Halleck of Indiana. I've been identifying Claude Pepper as a senator. He's an ex-senator, now a member of the House. On the right, extreme right, is Senator Pat McNamara of Michigan with the white hair. That is Congressman Fountain of North Carolina, who just shook hands. There he's standing between Halleck and Boggs. With the exception of Leslie Aarons of Illinois, this is the leadership of the House of Representatives. Again on the east front of the Capitol, cordon of military guard is preparing to assemble, representing the four branches, alternating rows: Marine, Navy, Air Force, Army, Coast Guard. Approaching from the south end is the empty caisson drawn by the white horses, turning toward the east to make a loop and stop in front of the east front steps. And the riderless horse with the inverted stirrups and the pair of black cavalry boots, toes pointed toward the rear. These are congressmen passing through now. Mr. Rodino of New York. Of New Jersey, rather. Looking down on the empty caisson. The 6 white horses. An artillery carriage. And the riderless horse. That horse showed as much spirit yesterday as John Kennedy had in life. Blooded animal. Mrs. Kennedy will be arriving here at the Capitol in about 30 minutes with her brother-in-law, the Attorney General. And again, they will follow the caisson through the city. Some of these are employees, some are congressmen, some are senators. This is again the Speaker of the House, John McCormick. Talking with the Capitol architect, George Stewart. Senator Alan Bible, Democrat of Nevada. The last of that group. If you have had a chance to be in the rotunda, you will notice that the honor guard, by technique, fixes a point on the wall, and each man picks out a point and just looks directly at it. His eyes never move, and then after his vision blurs, perhaps he changes to another point. Every muscle and every organ is in complete attention. There will be an invited, selected group of congressmen follow the case on. Here's the changing of the guard. Watch the step and the cadence. United Nations Ambassador Adlai Stevenson has just arrived, talking to one of the police lieutenants. I'll make a tentative identification. I think the woman there is Doris Fleeson, a newspaper woman. Here's the Military Guard of Honor, taking its place on the East Front Plaza. The 5 branches of the military services. Army, Marine, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy has not yet left the White House to come to the Hill here, but is expected to momentarily, perhaps within 5 minutes. She's due here at about 10:30. This is the Military Honor Guard in 2 rows, single file, facing each other across the steps leading up to the east front and into the rotunda. Speaker of the House still waiting with his colleagues in the rotunda. Minority Leader of the House, Charles Halleck. Carl Albert, Majority Leader in the House, Hale Boggs, the Majority Whip. There, directly behind Halleck, was Minority Whip Leslie Aarons of Illinois. This is the leadership of the House of Representatives and the congressional delegation. Of Chicago in the foreground. Here, the Joint Chiefs of Staff have now arrived. Curtis LeMay, Admiral McDonald. The caisson is now being brought into the full view of the public. To be drawn up just in front of these high-ranking military officers. Here's a picture from the top of the steps looking down through the columns of military honor guard at the riderless horse. There are the black boots with the toes pointed to the rear. And the sheathed sword. This is an artillery caisson. It will be behind this caisson that the car bearing Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General will follow. They are due here in a matter of minutes now. No movement to this ceremony is informal. Everything is prescribed by tradition and regulation. Every turn is precise, military. Crowd here in the plaza now probably numbers 6,000 to 8,000.
Today, coming out of the north portico of the White House with the members of the family to drive up to the Capitol. A string of cars has come here to carry Mrs. Kennedy and the members of the family who will be going with her. Cold, clear air here this morning, still and quiet, no wind, as the members of the family and close friends move out of the White House. the Attorney General and Senator Kennedy. They're in the car now. The doors will be closing. They'll be moving off the short drive up to the Capitol Rotunda, where the ceremonies will begin again. Slowly pulling away from the White House with a swift drive along Pennsylvania Avenue, retracing the procession of yesterday, the cortege, moving on up to the Capitol, and then to start the whole melancholy procession backwards again, back down here again to the White House. Car moving slowly down the east side of the North Portico Drive, moving past trees reminiscent of American history, trees planted by President Wilson, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, an American elm planted by Herbert Hoover, and just at the gate as they move out, they pass under the branches of the great scarlet oak tree, one of two planted along this drive by President Benjamin Harrison. Now the procession, as it comes out the gate, as seen from across the street in Lafayette Park, where a crowd has waited in the cold, clear air here now for several hours.
The line of cars has just made the turn from 15th Street, now heading east along Pennsylvania Avenue, down the center line with the great dome of the Capitol dominating the scene. Crossing the long shadows cast by the buildings on each side of Pennsylvania Avenue in the morning sun. Even after yesterday's tremendous crowd, there is a crowd here still on Pennsylvania Avenue. Sunlight picking up the reflection in the bumpers and the grill work. This is the car bearing Mrs. Kennedy and the Attorney General. All along the route are posted military. On both sides of the avenue. Now approaching the base of the Capitol Hill. procession in a moment will make a half left turn and then a half right, and then begin to mount Capitol Hill. This turn is at the intersection of Pennsylvania and Constitution. There's the great dome dominating the city. They approach. Turning now into the East Front Plaza. Stopped at the base of the steps to the East Front. The Attorney General, Mrs. Kennedy, and her brother-in-law, Senator Edward Kennedy. Kennedy in the veil of heavy mourning, and her two brothers-in-law in formal mourning coats. Mrs. Kennedy, the Senator, and the Attorney General now will pause at the base of the steps, and within 2 minutes, the casket will appear at the main door of the Capitol, and then we will have ruffles and flourishes, Hail to the Chief, and the hymn, O God of Loveliness. Now the military guard is bringing the casket out to the east front.
And so the Kennedy cortege retraces that sad route of yesterday, which was, of course, the joyous trip of Inauguration Day from the Capitol, the traditional one up Pennsylvania Avenue. Past now our vantage point, the crossroads of Constitution Avenue and Pennsylvania. A few noticeable differences in this passing today as compared to yesterday. A more military flavor, perhaps. Units, as you may have seen, from West Point, the Naval Academy, the Air Force Academy, the U.S. Coast Guard, honor detachments. And from other military units, we've counted 19 so far. Far up ahead, too far away for those in the area of the caisson to hear or see onward Christian soldiers. Bright, crisp, almost windless day. An ironic contrast to the day on which the president made this trip on Inauguration Day. The crowd markedly thick.